Back in '95, when I was in my 20s, I had a thing for starving artists, specifically painters. My parents didn't like me hooking up with what they called screw-ups. And as far as I was concerned, the more something I did piss them off, the better. So as I said, I liked painters. I used to go to galleries on opening day when I hoped that the artists themselves would be there. I'm sure that I got the curator's hopes up. I was a young, naive, flirtatious rich girl, but I wouldn't buy anything. I didn't go to the same place twice, so nobody got so mad as to throw me out. There was this guy, Ricardo. He was this big, hairy guy from Honduras with tattoos all down his arms and up his neck. He was really nice. I loved his accent. His painting was called Wide, and it was of a bear trap on a pine wood floor. I know that sounds weird as I'm saying it now, but it wasn't the weirdest thing in the gallery by a long shot. I'm pretty sure one guy put up a cubist painting of his junk. Apparently, Ricardo liked painting bear traps, or at least had been painting them for the past year or so. I once hooked up with a painter who was obsessed with Fabergé eggs. So again, that was something that wasn't too out of the ordinary for me. Ricardo and I hit it off, and I agreed to come over with him to his apartment. He warned me that it was brand new and didn't have a lot of furniture in it. I didn't mind. I was used to visiting guys at their friends' houses. He lived over in Dogwood. I had heard of it, but it wasn't a place I had ever wanted to go. It's one of those places that used to be something back in the day, but now it's just where all the druggies wind up. Some of the buildings in the town looked pretty old, and his was one of them. When he told me it was unfinished, he meant it. It had a lawn chair, a table, and a TV in the living room/dining room, and a mattress on the floor in the bedroom. Most of the space in the apartment was covered in newspaper, which was marked with thick drips of paint. His newest painting was standing in the dining room. This one's trap was rustier than the one in the gallery, and it was set on a sandy beach instead of a floor. He told me it was called Early. I asked him why he wanted to call it Early, and he said he was going to call it Before, but it felt too sinister. He didn't want his paintings to scare people, after all. This wasn't the first time I had heard the kind of screwy logic from a painter about their work, and I'd learned to nod at these things and move on. He went off to the bathroom, and I was left there to stare at his painting. This one had broad, heavy strokes to it. It reminded me of an impressionist piece where the heavy globs gave it texture. Photos can never do paintings proper justice. The best way to enjoy a painting is somewhere you can almost put your face up to it. A small voice at my side asked what the painting was supposed to be. I looked over, and a kid holding a teddy bear was standing there. The first thing I thought was, why didn't this guy say he had a kid? I told the kid it was a bear trap. He didn't like that at all. He held his teddy bear close to him and asked why it was a bear trap. I told him I didn't know. He said that his bear hated it. He had said his bear's name, but I don't remember what it was. And he said that he hated it too and wanted it out of here. He screamed at me and ran from the apartment. Ricardo came out of the bathroom a moment later, dripping wet, and I told him that his kid ran out. He said, "What kid?" So I said, "The kid that just screamed." Ricardo said that he didn't hear a scream. Ricardo had just come out of the shower, but I still felt like he should have been able to hear it. He and I got into a big argument over it because I was convinced that it was his kid and he was lying about it. Why else would the kid be at his place? I was really freaked out. The thing is, as I realized later, if it was his kid or the kid even knew him, he should have been pretty used to his paintings. I only wished I had realized that before I left his apartment and went home in a huff. Days later, I worked up the courage to go back there. His complex had a set of old wooden stairs that creaked a lot, and one step was so loud that it's like it was yelling out in pain. I knocked on his door and he wasn't there, but I was ready for that. I slipped a note with my phone number, a heart, and a frowny face on it under his door. Turning away from the door to leave, I saw that same teddy bear from before laying on its back in the hallway. I thought to myself, whoever's kid that was, they sure let him have a free run of the place. Ricardo called me that night and I went back there, but I kept checking the locks because I was worried that that kid would make his way back into the apartment somehow. I think I was too paranoid to really enjoy myself. Typically, that would be the end of it for me. I left his place in the morning and didn't expect to see him ever again. He had my number though, and he decided to use it. He called me up a week or so later, asking if I would like to come over so he could show me his latest painting. I didn't really want to. I was already planning my next gallery trip, but he was sweet, and I decided one more visit couldn't hurt. On my way up the steps, I found that really squeaky one again. This time, I was holding on to the banister as I went up, so I noticed something weird about it. As I stepped on it, the banister pushed up ever so slightly. I did this a couple more times to be absolutely sure of it, then got the hell off the steps as soon as I could. When Ricardo opened the door, I wanted to tell him that I didn't like this building, but he got the first words in and I forgot about it until later. He led me over to his new piece, which, of course, was another bear trap. This one was out in the middle of a forest, and deer were looking on from the background. They weren't looking at the bear trap, though. They were looking at the camera, or the viewer, I guess. The deer weren't much bigger than my thumb each, but he had gone into some fine detail on them. I could see the whiskers on one of them, and they were all very expressive. They looked pleading. The view was very close to the ground, and we had a good view of each part of the trap. I could see the screws in the hinges, the tension in the bows, the eagerness of the locking bar, or whatever it's called. He told me that this has been a good few days for him, that he hadn't had any distractions. I asked him if the little boy ever bothered him, and he said he'd never seen a boy around those apartments. I left in the night this time. I wasn't comfortable sleeping over. I went down the steps, but after the first flight, I looked back up and saw that kid peeping over the rail at me. "Make him leave," he said. "Make him leave." Then he held up his teddy bear. "He doesn't like him." I didn't say anything back. I left as fast as I could. As I ran down the steps, I got the sense that something was chasing me, and right up to the moment I ran out the door, I felt heavy steps behind mine, like a large animal. I realized the next day that I had left my earrings at his apartment. I told myself that what I had felt that night was in my head, that it wasn't anything beyond some bratty kid. I went back for the last time, and while I was there, I was going to tell him to call someone about that boy. When I got there, the boy was on the steps. He looked really mad, and he was holding a hammer. He said that his bear was dead, but that he had made the man pay. Local painter killed by staircase. That was on the text crawl of the news a couple days later. That's all he got. That's all anyone ever knew about it, outside of me and his family. The town's basketball team had a recent win, and I guess the news thought that was more important. I saw the body. I was the one who called the police. The stairs had broken under him, and the banister broke free of the railing. Wooden poles from the banister pinned him down against what was left of the step, jutting out from the wall. I think he must have bled out there for hours. If he yelled out, nobody heard him. Later, I found out that not one other person lived in those apartments. I didn't go to the funeral. It wouldn't have felt right. I mean, I didn't feel like I'd earned a seat there. What I did go to was the auction his family held, where they sold off some of his paintings. The last one he ever did was there. But it wasn't the way I remembered it. I bought it, just so I could get a better look at it. The deer in the background were gone. The light through the trees was more yellow, like it was later in the day. The biggest change was that the trap had sprung. Its jaws clamped on wads of cotton and brown fabric. It had caught a bear.